Hello. So sorry about that little internet technicality. My computer decided it was going to be a little temperamental this Friday. But we're here now. Welcome. Um, welcome to my book garden. Actually, welcome to my basement. But we're here to have a great time. So does it really matter? I don't think so. Anyway, this is the second session of Little Mushroom. The first one is a little introduction to the channel, as well as the first three chapters. I kind of have decided that I'm going to do these in 3 chapter increments, trying to get 2 times a week. This week it was Wednesday and Friday, but I think we'll probably end up doing Tuesdays and Thursdays, just because it seems like that might work a bit better. Hoping you all had an absolutely wonderful week. Happy Friday. And that being said, oh, yes, the technicalities. So, this is Little Mushroom. I do not own it. I am not the author of it. I am not the publisher of it. The only thing that I own is this physical copy in front of me. Right? I got a book stand because I was looking down too much last time. But this is all that I own. I don't claim anything with it. I have no rights to anything except my time. And that's about it. So hopefully you will come along. You'll be able to enjoy it. This is a 17 plus stream. This book, though I have not read it before, I do know it deals with some very serious topics, as we saw last stream. So kind of listen at your own, I don't want to say own risk, but your own choice. And know that it may get pretty dark. It's probably going to get pretty dark. So please don't come at me about that. Listen at your own discretion. That's where I was going with that. And I think that covers pretty much all the legalities of this. So now we can get on to the fun part, which is chapter 4. All right. Ah, yes, another interesting title. Lu Feng, I hope you die a miserable death. That is the start of chapter 4. Vance's blood spread out in Anji's peripheral vision, forming a pool of crimson. The people in line heard the sound. They turned around one after another to look, but after glimpsing this scene, they indifferently turned back again, as if nothing had happened at all. That's kind of cold. But Vance was dead. A human had been killed at the human base's gates, and nobody raised any objection. Thus, Anji suddenly realized that this person was the arbiter, the person Vance had mentioned to him a day earlier. He was the master of the trial court, determining whether each person entering the city was human or xenogenic. He could decide anyone's fate, no matter who they were, needing no justification. Now it was his own turn to stand trial. Ooh. Anji's heart thudded wildly at first. The instant that the barrel of the gun pointed at him, he realized that he was really going to die. But as he looked at the arbiter's icy green eyes, he gradually calmed down again. Coming to the northern base was his unavoidable decision, so being judged was his fate, no matter the outcome. That's a good way to look at it. He silently counted the seconds in his mind. 1, 2, 3. Long time passed with no gunshot ringing out. The arbiter, keeping the gun trained on him, slowly walked over. The people in line, seeming to tacitly agree to speed up, spontaneously compressed forward. A moment later, this tiny area was deserted, save for Anji alone. 11, 12, 13. After Anji counted to the 14th second, the arbiter stopped in front of him, ring finger resting on the gun stock, and lowered the muzzle. Then he put the weapon away. "Come with me," Anji heard him say. His voice was ice cold and flat, just like his eyes. Ooh. Anji stood in place, waiting for him to go. But he didn't move even after 3 seconds had gone by. He lifted his head up uncertainly, then heard the arbiter's voice turn even colder. Hold out your hand. Anji obediently held out his hand. Click. An ice-cold chill made him shiver. One end of a silver handcuff was fastened around his wrist, while the other end was in the officer's hand. Kinky. It was in this manner in which Anji was led away. The strange thing was, when Vance got shot, the people in line didn't react at all. Now that he was being taken away by the arbiter, though, they put their heads together and whispered amongst themselves. Anji only had time to look back at Vance's body lying flat on the ground before he was pulled through the city gates. Once inside, he discovered that the interior space wasn't a cramped passageway, but rather a vast area divided into several spaces. Bright white lights shone everywhere, the bounce of their glow off the steel walls looking like winter's snowfall, reflected shine cast upon the light gray shale. Ooh, shale, not steel. There was no fewer armed soldiers or heavy weapons compared to the outside. Within the tight encirclement of the heavy weapons and soldiers was a long, snow-white table. 3 officers in black uniforms, just like the arbiters. Anji guessed they were judges. Sat behind it, and a human sat across from them. One of the judges was asking him, "How is the relationship between you and your wife? When you left the city this time, was she not with you?" That's a really weird question for somebody to ask somebody else. Like, if you're being judged, like, am I about to shoot you? How's your wife doing, man? Like, still pretty? That just seems strange. From Anzi's memories, Anji learned that besides changes to appearance, bearing, and habits, the intelligence and memories of... Oh, okay, now I see. Memories of infected humans would be affected as well. So interrogation was also a method of identifying xenogenics. There it is. The person who brought him inside glanced in that direction and said, "Hurry up." After the judge in the middle replied with a, "Yes, sir," he looked at the person being tried. "You may go now." Oh, that was a xenogenic. Anji just saved his butt. As if he had survived a calamity, the man broke out into a smile, then got up and swiftly walked through the city gate's passageway. Thus, Anji knew that this man who brought him here was indeed none other than the arbiter. His "hurry up" was not to hasten the judges to speed up their interrogation, rather to show that he had already determined in the span of a moment that the person being tried was human. Okay. The next person to be tried walked from the line towards the long table. The distance between the line and the table was very long, with several door-shaped machines behind them, and a section that included turns as well as uphill and downhill slopes. Anji realized that this was to show the movement characteristics of the person being tried to the judges to the fullest possible extent. But he had no more time to see more, because in the following second he was led around a corner and into a long corridor. I mean, if you're looking for differences in movement, like anyone who has a limp or anything, like, they're just kind of screwed in that situation. Like, I feel bad for anybody that has well, they're probably not alive anymore, honestly. But hey, you walk funny. Xenogenic! Hang on, I need a sippy sip. My magical winged potion. Okay. That person took it up. Hang on. I think I skipped a page. Nope. But he had no more time to see more, because the following seconds led around a corner into a long corridor. That person took... I guess we're talking about the arbiter. That person took out a black communication device and said, "Trial Court Lu Feng, requesting genetic examination." Anji guessed that the two words in the middle were his name. Mechanical door promptly slid open in front of them, and Lu Feng walked straight in, the force of his pull making Anji stumble before he caught up. The room was silvery white. Mysterious mechanical devices were arranged from floor to ceiling, and 6 soldiers standing guard were scattered all about. Behind the workbench at one end of the room sat a young male human with short blonde hair and blue eyes clad in a white lab coat. What a surprise it is for Colonel Liu to come here. He pushed up his glasses on his nose, the tone of his voice lifting up at the end in provocation. Don't you always solve all your problems with bullets? Lu Feng said coldly, Please cooperate, doctor. The doctor glanced at Lu Feng, a shadow of a smile on his face. Then he got up and said to Anji, Come with me. After following him, Anji was made to lie on a silvery white platform, and rings around his hands and feet fixed his limbs in place. The doctor said, Don't move. Immediately afterward, Anji felt a pain in his arm, turned his head in that direction, and saw the doctor slowly drawing a tube of bright red blood from his body. The doctor said, The color of your blood is very healthy. Thank you for the compliment, Anji replied. The doctor was amused by his response. To be fair, at that point, it's like, what else are you going to say? Yeah, I tried really hard on it. Amusing, but still, the blood will be sent for a genetic examination, which will take an hour. The full body enhanced scan is expected to take 40 minutes. Don't move. He finished speaking, and the silver platform began to glow with a blue light. The surroundings emitted a directionless, low hum. The source of the sound was every single particle of air. The omnipresent noise made Anji recall those distant nights in the abyss. The faraway ocean gave off the dull, lapping sounds of waves, and in the darkest times of the night, the howls of unknown creatures came from that direction. Fluctuations that human language could not possibly describe swept away the entirety of the rain-drenched land. The electric current was like countless ants crawling over and biting his body. To a mushroom, 40 minutes was by no means a long time, but Anji thought that this may be the last 40 minutes of his life. Cherishing them, he studied the mechanical lines on the ceiling. He was unsure how much time had passed when he heard Lu Feng say outside, Sarang? I think I'm saying it right. Sarang. I'm going to go with Sarang. Sarang told me that your examination methods have been upgraded. You're very well informed, the doctor said. We've discovered that when the human body undergoes mutation, some special fragments of their DNA will be activated. We've named them biological targets. The biological targets of animal-type mutations and plant-type mutations are 2 major categories. The improved gene detection has 2 processes that occur simultaneously. One is animal-type target detection, while the other is plant-type target detection. Total time needed for both is an hour. Congratulations, Lu Feng said. The doctor let out a laugh. Ha! Colonel, if the time needed for genetic examinations is greatly shortened and the cost is reduced, won't your trial court be put out of work? I look forward to it with relish. You're seriously boring. This guy just wants to mess with him. He's like, Their conversation ceased. Meanwhile, Anji looked up at the silvery white ceiling and began to ponder what his own species was. He was a mushroom. Doctor had said the mutations were divided into animal-type mutations and plant-type mutations. Thought that firstly, mushrooms weren't a kind of animal. True. Secondly, mushrooms didn't seem to be plants either. He didn't have leaves. I mean, if we're getting into technicalities, that is not is it? Is that? All right, I'm going to have to look that up at the end of the stream. Do you need to have leaves to be considered a plant? Because I don't think, there's beans. Oh, that's a girl from Leave. That's going to bug me. All right. We will find out at the end of this if you need to have leaves to be considered a plant. I don't think so, but we'll see. He spent too much time contemplating this question. Yeah, me too. Before he arrived at a conclusion, the blue light disappeared from his side like an ebbing tide. All right, the doctor's voice rang out. All right. The doctor's voice rang out, and the mechanical rings automatically released. He then heard the doctor continue talking. Colonel, may I ask why you brought him here for a genetic examination? No. Doctor was clearly rendered speechless. He helped Anji up and had him sit down in a swivel chair on one side, and then patted his head. Good boy. Rest here for a short bit while I go look at the results for the blood test. Anji sat in place. That colonel, the arbiter, sat on the other side, still watching him with icy green eyes. His was a young face with clear contours, and at the brim of his hat, a few locks of black hair hung down over his forehead to rest against the ends of his sloped eyebrows. His expression, which the room painted with a thin layer of cold light, serrated Anji's eyes like a knife. The stare from this pair of eyes made Anji feel very cold. Mushrooms were afraid of the cold. As a result, he rotated the swivel chair, turning his back to the colonel. He felt even colder. A very long time later, the doctor's footsteps finally came thawing into the room. That's a very interesting way to put that. There are no abnormalities in the genetic report. You two can go. Ooh, he tricked the system. I need another sippy sipping. After a few seconds of silence, Lu Feng said, "You're 100% sure he's human." Doctor replied, "It may disappoint you otherwise. We truly haven't found any biological targets. Other infected ones in xenogenics have at least 10 or more." After that, he said, "Look, this little friend of ours doesn't even want to acknowledge you." Then Anji heard the colonel say, "Turn back around." Anji silently turned back around. Facing Lu Fang's gaze, he was a bit avoidant because he truly wasn't human. But even this tiny avoidance of his somehow irritated the colonel. His voice was like ice water when he spoke again. "What are you afraid of?" Anji didn't say a word. He knew that in front of this man, the more he spoke, the more mistakes he'd make. Perhaps his weakness would be discovered. Last, Lu Feng raised his eyebrows. "You still aren't leaving?" So Anji obediently jumped down from the chair and left with him again. This time he was free without being led in handcuffs. The deserted corridor, they reached the halfway point when Lu Feng suddenly spoke up. "At first glance, I instinctively felt that you weren't human." Anji nearly had a heart attack. A full 3 seconds passed before he asked, Then what about the second glance?" "This is the first time I've requested a genetic examination." The colonel held out the genetic examination report to him. "You'd best be one." Anji could only silently accept the report, stating that everything about him was normal. For a short while, there was only the monotonous sounds of their footsteps in the silvery white corridor. Near the exit, there was a corner where they ran into a party of people. In the lead was a judge, clad in a black uniform, and behind the judge were 2 heavily armed soldiers restraining a man as they walked over. Next to them, there was also a tall woman with short hair and a distressed expression. Spotting Lu Feng, the judge said, "Colonel." Lu Feng looked at the restrained man and received a look back. The man's throat spasmed a few times before exclaiming, "I haven't been infected!" The judge snapped to attention on the spot and said to Lu Feng, Infection is strongly suspected, but there is no conclusive evidence. The next of kin are demanding a genetic examination. Lu Feng made a soft sound of acknowledgement, and the soldiers continued forward with the man in their custody. Just as they passed Lu Feng, bang! Lu Feng put away his gun and walked off without looking back. There's no need. Man's body instantly pitched forward, held up only by the soldiers. The women following them shrieked and collapsed to the floor. Anji turned to look at Lu Feng's expression. His gaze was so cold. The mushroom had never seen such a look before. He knew Anzi was always gentle. Vance was easygoing and generous. Hosen was filled with greed, and Anthony was completely on guard. But Lu Feng was different. There was nothing in his eyes at all. Man, that's rough. Like, you can tell he's been through some shit. Anji thought that to the Arbiter, killing others may have been more normal than breathing. He wouldn't experience any change in emotion because he had already gotten accustomed to the sight long ago. They soon came to the exit. Near the exit, 2 soldiers in simple attire were waiting for him with a body covered in white cloth. Anji knew it was Vance. His eyesight went blurry. Took a step forward, wishing to lift away the cloth and look at Vance's face once more, but one of the soldiers stopped him. The soldier held out a blue chip to him and said in a steady voice, "Mercenary team AR-1147 has been confirmed to have no survivors, and the equipment and materials have been reclaimed by the base. Loot has been converted into currency and combined with the consolation payment for disbursement to the next of kin. Please claim the remains." "Where are you taking him?" Anji asked. The soldier replied, "The incinerator." His body trembled slightly, and for a long time he didn't accept the ID card. Lu Feng's voice rang out, "Do you not want it?" Anji said nothing. After a long while, he lifted his head to look at Lu Feng. He really wasn't wounded. In that pair of icy green eyes, he saw his own reflection, eyes slightly widened and a quiet grief. Lu Feng was still expressionless, as if none of this had anything to do with him. However, just as Anji thought he might turn and leave, he took a step forward instead. The black gun stock lifted up the edge of the white fabric, and the part revealed was Vance's right hand. Anji got down on one knee and saw that on the tip of his ring finger was a tiny red dot. It seemed like the most trivial puncture, but at the edges of the red dot, a drop of ominous dark gray liquid was slowly oozing out. He was stunned. Instant, those images came to mind. There's human blood on the ant armor. On that very day, Vance told him that some people would hide the fact that they'd been wounded because in places with a low degree of population, still a chance that they wouldn't be infected after getting wounded. The person wanted to go home. Oof. Wow. Therefore, the person pricked by the piece of ant armor wasn't Anthony, but Vance. G found it difficult to breathe. With trembling fingers, he accepted Vance's ID card and put it into the bag at his side. Then he turned to look at Lu Feng, but the space next to him was empty. He stood up and looked out to see a sharp black figure beneath the gray skies at the city gate traveling further away, little by little. A moment later, there was a commotion behind him. He turned back to see the woman, whose companion had just been killed, stumble forward before the soldiers restrained her. "Lu Feng, Arbiter!" She desperately struggled, throwing herself forward and flailing her arms in the air as she screeched, "I hope you die a miserable death!" A hoarse, shrill voice burst from her chest and echoed in the building, but she didn't even get so much as a backwards glance from the Arbiter. Surroundings gradually quieted, and the 2 corpses were taken away one at a time. Spacious corridor, there were only the woman's broken sobs. I mean, you gotta give the man props for figuring it out from the finger, but Kind of curious if he has like a spidey sense or something that just doesn't work on mushrooms. Continuing. A long time passed before the woman by the wall stopped crying. With reddened eyes and disheveled hair, she leaned against the wall and looked at the distant sky, not saying a word. She was like a drop of water on a leaf, breaking with just a touch. Anji carefully asked, "You aren't leaving?" She shook her head, and her voice was raspy as she said, "The one who died. What relationship did he have with you?" Anji spent a very long time finding the appropriate word from his memories. "My friend. He saved me. My man also saved me before." After saying that, her head hung low, and her shoulders and back trembled as she occasionally let out one or two weepy sounds. She didn't speak again. Anji held Vance's ID card in a tight grip. From his heart, that place belonging to the human heart, came a stifling feeling. When he had been only and purely a mushroom, he had never experienced this sort of feeling before. It was only after the feeling had finally dissipated a little that he found his strength. Following the direction of the distant stream of people, he walked towards the corridor exit. At the end of the city gate passageway was a row of mechanical gates, and Anji selected the one furthest to the left. When he walked over, a gentle robotic female voice said, "Please produce your ID card and look at the camera." Anji put the card that he had let's start that over. Anji put the card that had belonged to Anzi on the area of the platform to the right of the gate that glowed with white light, then lifted his gaze to look at the black camera in front. ID 32611705514. Name Anzi. Home, Outer City, District 6. Time away from city, 27 days. The camera made a slight noise and the white light turned green. Facial recognition passed. Welcome home. With a ding, the gate lifted and Anji walked out. The blinding morning sunlight made him squint, and he recovered only 30 seconds later. As the blurry world became clear again, a massive gray city appeared before his eyes. Around him was a large open area, and the words "buffer zone" were written on the ground in blinding green paint. Up ahead, human creations sprang up from the ground. Tall concrete buildings were everywhere, even more massive than the tallest plants Anji had ever seen, and seemed like they could topple over at any time. They stood upright, crowding together in overlapping arrangements, and blocked his line of sight. He looked up. Half of the orange sun was hidden behind the tallest building, while the other half was exposed. It looked like a drop of diluted blood that was about to drip down the wall. Anji turned back. The people who had come out from the city gate with him had been separated by the mechanical gates, but after passing through, they spontaneously clustered together and traveled in the same direction. Anji moved forward with them, and after a few hundred steps, he rounded a corner. Oh, man. Oop, hang on. My wall really doesn't like Wang Xian, which I find upsetting because that's one of my favorites. Anyway, Anji turned back. The people who had come out from the city gate with him had been separated by the mechanical gates, but after passing through, they spontaneously clustered together and traveled in the same direction. Anji moved forward with them, and after a few hundred steps, he rounded a corner. On a sign were the words "Rail Transit," and a train was stopped on the rails. The body of the train read, "Entrance, District 1, Supply Depot 3, District 5, District 8, City Affairs Office, Exit." He followed the stream of people onto the train, then found a corner of the slightly empty coach to sit down in. The seats before him were two strapping men who were conversing in low voices. "Back from Basin 3? You guys sure gambled with your lives out there. We lost 6. Not bad. You break even? The military is still conducting their appraisal. I think I won't even have to go out and risk my life in the wilderness again. Wow. We entered a school in Ghost City 441. It was full of mutated plants, so nobody dared to go in. Man laughed. Huh. We went in and pried out 3 hard drives from the library's reference room. They're priceless treasures. We just have to see how valuable the things saved on them are. Anji silently listened. Although he didn't quite understand, he knew that this man in front of him was very happy, so he felt a little happier as well. He knew that happy people often didn't mind helping others, so he called out, "Sir." Without even turning back, the man said, "What is it?" "How do I get to District 6? Transfer to Line 2 at the supply depot." "Thank you." 5 minutes later, the train began to move, and a robotic voice announced the name of each platform. Anji was very unfamiliar with everything. After several setbacks and requests for directions, he finally got onto the Line 2 train at the supply depot, then got off correctly to arrive at District 6. Yeah, I was kind of wondering about that. Like, how will this guy figure out train systems when people who have lived in cities or like come from I think it's probably like someone who comes from the country and arrives maybe at a main train hub and is like, okay. Anzi's ID number was 32611705514. This string of numbers was not only the proof of his human identity, it also represented his address, which was the Outer Cities, District 6, Building 117, door plate number 0514. But not long after he got off the train, while he was attempting to find someone who could ask for directions, a young boy suddenly grabbed him. "Hello, friend. Welcome. Would you mind getting to know us?" Before Anji could say anything, a piece of white paper was stuffed into his hand. In large blood-red words, it read, "Oppose the arbiter's tyranny!" He didn't understand the reason for it, but didn't ask further either. He only said, "Excuse me, do you know how to get to Building 117? You don't mind coming along with us, right?" the boy said. "I don't." "Then we're comrades now." The boy lifted up the white paper in his own hand, said in large red words, "Abolish the Arbiter's Code." They weren't the only 2 carrying papers. Soon Anji was pulled into a crowd. Around 40 odd people, all of whom had very young faces. Each person was either holding up a similar piece of white paper individually or working in tandem with a partner to hold up a long banner. Sentences on the papers and banners were roughly the same. We volunteer to bear the cost of genetic examinations. Judges are sinners against humanity. Dissolve the trial court and bring justice for the innocent." At the same time, the crowd was slowly moving forward, so Anji could only move with it. The city's roads were very narrow. Sunlight shone down upon the buildings, and the buildings cast irregular shadows upon the ground. On the road, apart from them, there were also quite a few adults walking with their heads down. They occasionally lifted their heads and glanced in the crowd's direction, but then they very quickly looked away. Hang on. If anyone's there, like it so far, our baby boy entered the city and almost immediately found a cult. Woohoo! He really has shit luck. Anji asked, "What are we doing?" "A silent demonstration," the boy said. "We march until the day that the trial court is dissolved." Oh. After walking for approximately half an hour, he once again asked the boy next to him, "Where's Building 117? "Up ahead. We're almost there." Another half an hour passed, and Anji asked again, "Where's Building 117? Sorry, the boy scratched his head. I forgot about you. We walked past it. It's back there. As he spoke, he turned and pointed. Over there, it's not far away. The building number is written on the side. You can see it right there. Thank you, Anji said. You're welcome, the boy replied. Anji handed the piece of paper to the boy. I'll return this to you. No need. The boy stuffed the paper back into his arms. Remember to come back next week. Be gathering at Building 1. Thus, Anji could only put the bloody "Oppose the Arbiter's tyranny" paper together with the gene report the Arbiter himself had shoved at Anji. Holding them in his arms, he left this group of strange young humans and walked in the direction that had been pointed out to him. While walking, he felt that the surrounding environment was gradually becoming familiar as the memories in his mind that had originally belonged to Anzi were awakened. He intuitively made a few turns and arrived at the building labeled 117 without any issues. I'd say any further issues, honestly. Like, he's had a number of issues. Hey, Anne. Thank you for tuning in. I'm so excited you're here. We have entered the city. We got pulled in for a genetic test. We actually passed and found out that Vance actually was infected and was hiding it. And now we just got pulled into a silent protest against the Arbiter and have finally found are about to find our apartment. So it was a rectangular building, 10 stories high, but very wide. He entered Unit 0, and after climbing the quiet and steep stairs to the 5th floor, he entered a dim corridor and found number 14. Not 14, not 12. A white seal was stuck to the door. Anji gently tore it off, revealing a sensor area underneath. When he put the ID card up to it, the lock sprang open and he walked in. It was a very small room. It was even smaller than the cave he used to live in, but it was much brighter and more spacious than the rest area in the armored car. Near the wall was a wooden desk. More than 10 old books piled up on it, and sheets of loose leaf paper and notebooks were stacked together on the other side. The desk faced a single-person bed. There was a nightstand at the head of the bed, upon which a water cup, a mirror, and some odds and ends were placed, and a wardrobe slightly taller than the height of a human was shoved up against the foot of the bed. The window was on the other side of the bed. Its gray curtains were half open, sunlight shining in and lighting up the quilt that was the same color, and there was a dry fragrance that reminded him of Anzi's scent. He walked over to the bed, then reached out and removed the palm-sized mirror. The mirror reflected his face. He looked like Anzi, with soft black hair and eyes that were the same color. They were alike in many places, but there were also some details that weren't the same. In addition, he didn't have Anzi's gentle and calm expression. Back then, Anzi had said to him, "It's like I've gained a younger brother. How about I give you a name, little mushroom?" Is there anything you have a very deep recollection of, little mushroom? Only 2 things were deeply etched into his limited memory. One was the loss of his spore, and the other was something that happened when he was very small, around when he was only about as long as a human's pinky finger. Little bitty. In the rainy season, when the mushrooms were growing, a raindrop fell at an angle that had struck his slender stem, snapping him at the waist. Ow. That's a powerful raindrop. Just whatcha. Then, just like any other injured creature, he strove to grow back, to live. Then after that, he gradually gained some vague consciousness. He had healed. From then on, he seemed to have become different from his own kind. He could control his own hype, move between the jungle and open fields, and perceive the sounds and movements outside. He was a free mushroom. Poor little thing. That time Anzi had ruffled his hair. Did it hurt a lot when you were snapped in half? I've forgotten. Anzi had then said, "Then I'll call you Anji, written with a Chinese character for snap. He had said, okay. At this point in his recollection, Anji smiled at the mirror. The person in the mirror smiled. He seemed to see a shadow of Anzi again. Thank you, he said to the mirror. After putting down the mirror, Anji sat down at the desk. What should he do next? After some thinking, Anji held out his left hand and stared at his own fingertips beneath the light. Snow-white hype quickly extended from his fingertips, then consolidated, picked up the dagger and cut off a small, thin piece of it. Then he picked it up with his right hand, put it up to his mouth, gently pushed it in, and bit down, for he had decided to investigate the matter of his own toxicity. Its soft, sweet, and very tasty flavor was his first impression. In the following second, the entire world began to sway before his eyes. I'm almost positive I'm poisonous. Let's see how poisonous. And on that note, we arrive at chapter 5. Hang on. I'm just going to cross my legs. All right, chapter 5. You're not Anzi. Then he became lighter, bobbing up and down in the air. The sunlight streaming in from the window turned into surging seawater. Papers and notebooks on the table that were soaked in it became a mass of white. Anji blinked. He didn't feel uncomfortable, only that all of his movements had become very, very slow and uncertain. He couldn't control his own body. It was like he had taken flight, yet also like he was on the verge of falling. And after that, the world before his eyes gradually darkened, and he completely lost consciousness. I'm sorry, carbonation. The cold woke him up. After awakening, he discovered that the unbroken backdrop of gray buildings outside the window was immersed in the gold-red glow of the setting sun. Since he had fallen asleep, or rather fainted, at least 7 or 8 hours had passed. It turned out that the poison in his hype made people lethargic. Unlike the daytime, the temperature in the room was much lower in the evening. Anji lay back on the bed and wrapped himself in the quilt, only then recovering his warmth. But after the numbness brought on by the cold disappeared, he felt hungry. Anji preferred to absorb nutrients the way mushrooms did, but on his way here, he didn't find even a single patch of damp soil in the entire base, so he could only eat food. Frowning, he thought that humans were a very troublesome sort of creature. I'm sure they think the exact same thing about you, bud. Fortunately, Anzi's residual memories told him where he should go to eat. The base was divided into 8 districts, with District 6, 7, and 8 serving as the main residential districts. Here, every building was a community. The first floor was the main hall, where food and water would be provided every day at fixed times. Children 16 years old and under received free allotments, while adults over 16 years old needed to swipe their cards to pay with the base's currency, the unit of which was the letter R. The main hall didn't have too many people, perhaps 50-some visible at a glance. There was only 2 windows for selling food. One was an edible paste made from the tuber of a certain plant. The other was a soup made from the same tuber. Searching his memories, he vaguely recalled that this plant was called potato. Anzi swiped his card to pay. Mashed potatoes. Price 0.5 R. Balance 9.5 R. Potato soup. Price 0.3 R. Balance 9.2 R. As he stared at the numbers representing the balance on his card, Anzi realized that he would be on the edge of starvation in a few days. The feeling was like that of a mushroom taking root in a patch of dry soil, facing death at any given moment. When he returned to the fifth floor after his meal and spent 0.1 R to get water at the communal water room, the feeling became even clearer. Thus, he now had one more thing to do: find a sense of income. Welcome to the daily grind! After screwing shut the standard stainless steel bottle's cap, Anji held the bottle in his hands and was about to turn around when a voice suddenly rang out behind him. Anzi? The loud voice, trembling somewhat, echoed in the cramped space. Anji turned around. Standing in the corridor was a young man with a tall build and handsome face. He looked straight at Anji with eyes wide open and lips quivering. It was difficult to decide if his expression was actually joy or shock. Anzi, he called out again, "You've returned? Didn't you?" At those words, he abruptly lost his voice and his complexion turned blue. It's like he didn't know how to continue. But Anji knew what he wanted to say because he knew this person. He was called Josh. Josh was Anzi's neighbor and friend, and they had grown up together. Sometimes Josh would take care of Anzi, but more often Anzi would take care of him. Spotty residual memories appeared before Anji's eyes. But his knowledge of Josh didn't all come from Anzi's recollections. When he was a mushroom, he had seen this person before. The combination of what he had seen and Anzi's memories supplied the entire real cause of Anzi's death. Anzi had been someone who lived off of writing. His work was to write novels, essays, and the poems for people's entertainment and submit them to the base monthly periodical. The base would regularly publish these pamphlets. But just 3 months prior, to conserve the increasingly stretched manpower and resources, the base abolished that department. Back then, Anzi, what are you reading? Josh asked. I want to prepare for the base supplies deposit selection exam. Anzi doodled circles on the book with his pen. I think I'd like to work there, and the pay is good. But Josh frowned. You want to stop being a civilian? He asked. The exam is very difficult. Anzi said, That's fine. But Josh's voice became harsher. Anzi, you've clearly known all this time that I want to be able to get out into the wilderness with you. Anzi smiled. The tone of his voice was very soft, both like he was indulging this headstrong friend and also like a resigned sigh. I'm not suited to going outside. I'll protect you. Josh held him by the shoulder, and the tone of his voice softened. I can't leave you. Come with me into the wilderness. We won't go anywhere dangerous. The fragments in his memory were more or less all like this. At last, in the face of Josh's relentless badgering, Anzi had agreed to go adventuring in the wilderness together with him. Josh was a member of a large mercenary group. Having previously performed some meritorious deeds, he was very easily introduced as Anzi to the team. The latter was responsible for the allocations and record-keeping of their materials. But anything could happen in the wilderness. That day, the team had gotten lost and driven into the fringes of the abyss. By the time they noticed the unusual abundance of mushrooms there, it was already too late. The monsters of the abyss wouldn't let slip any food that came into their mouth. To humans, even the outermost fringes of the abyss were mortally terrifying. 3 of the 5 armored cars were damaged, and the people of those 3 cars transferred over to the intact armored cars in a panic. When they were fleeing, Anzi had pushed Josh, allowing him to narrowly escape the attacks from airborne winged monsters, but Anzi consequently tripped over the vines on the ground. Josh had frozen up on the spot for a second. After the second passed, his survival instinct surpassed everything else. Between pulling Anzi up and fleeing with his own life, he chose the latter, gritting his teeth and sprinting forward before the captain pulled him into the armored car, whereas Anzi was watching their figures, having been stabbed through the chest by a monster's bony spear. Oh, spur, not spear. Sorry. The mercenary team promptly began fighting with the monsters using their heaviest firepower, retreating as they fought. The sounds of their activity were so loud that they woke up Anji. He He had come out to look for his spore, but he had always gone home empty-handed. This time was an exception. Taking advantage of the fierce fighting, he quietly brought Anzi back with him to the depths of the cave. So now that he was facing Josh, Anji had nothing to say. When facing death, the first reaction of any living being was to flee. Josh didn't do anything wrong, but Anji didn't like him. Yeah, I mean, he basically has this one recollection of a very sweet human, and now he meets the person that abandoned said human. Like, I'm not surprised, like, he doesn't like him. I mean, he's also a very simple organism to, like, black and white concepts, etc. Anyway. Let's see. You kinda don't seem like yourself. Josh's Adam's apple bobbed hard. Your wound healed? You escaped from the abyss? Anji only looked calmly at him. No, you're not Anzi. You aren't human. Josh took an abrupt step back, his face chalk white. You're xenogenic. My apologies. Anji walked out, brushing past him. I accidentally ate a poison mushroom, so I don't remember who you are. In a way, he hadn't lied. With those words, Anji ceased paying attention to him and walked straight forward. For a long time, there were no footsteps behind him. It was only when he swiped his ID card to open the door that Josh hurried over and grabbed his shoulder. You're really Anzi, but you... Anji casually picked up the genetic examination report lying on the table and held it out to Josh. Josh said, This is... Anji looked down and discovered that the topmost page read, Opposite oppose the arbiter's tyranny. He slowly pulled the paper away. Josh looked at the report. You... He skimmed over it, then looked up at Anji. You really escaped from the abyss? I was saved, Anji said. I've forgotten the rest. Josh's hand that was holding the gene report trembled. The corners of his mouth tugged upward, revealing a smile as he looked at Anji. I was too agitated. I didn't think that you could come back. He put the gene report on the table and leaned forward. Leaned toward Anji with a slightly excited expression. Even the muscles at the ends of his eyebrows were twitching. How much have you forgotten? Anji took a step back. I've forgotten everything, he said. Please don't bother me. You don't remember who I am either? Josh lowered his voice a bit. We grew up together. Thank you, Anji said. Can you please go get out now? Josh obviously had not expected that Anji would treat him with that kind of attitude, and was stunned. He said, You weren't like this before. But a moment later, his attitude softened again. I won't bother you. Have a good rest, and I'll come to see you tomorrow. I'm overjoyed, Anzi. We're the people closest to each other in the world. Anji remained silent up until when Josh turned around and left, softly shutting the door for him. For Josh to let him off this easily and leave the room, Anji thought it was unrealistic, but it was also possible that Josh had fled due to his excessive sense of guilt. Silence returned to the room. Anji slowly leaned against the bed and hugged the pillow, feeling a sadness that was like wispy smoke. This sadness wasn't for himself, but for Anzi. The promises between humans were more or less this fragile. Josh would no longer be the person closest to Anzi. Once he found his spore, he would return to the abyss, find that quiet cave, take root next to Anzi's snow-white bones, spend the rest of his life as a mushroom. His spore. Outside the window, the night was dark and the aurora fluctuated in the pitch-black skies as usual. Anji sat at the table and turned on the desk lamp. First of all, he had to find a job so he wouldn't starve to death. At the same time, he had to search for information related to his spore. His only lead was the brass bullet shell. At that thought, Anji anxiously touched his pocket. Was in constant fear of losing it. Good. It was still there. He could hide it within his body as a mushroom, but not as a human. It was so small that it seemed able to slip out from his pocket at any given moment. Honestly, I'm kind of surprised people weren't like, "What's this, buddy? Like, why you got this?" But I mean, if it's a dystopian society, like I imagine people have their quirks, definitely have their quirks. So keeping a bullet casing in your pocket is not the worst thing. Okay. In the end, Anji found a black leather cord from one of the drawers in the room and hung the bullet shell around his neck. There was a small black device in the drawer as well. He examined its exterior details with great effort, then found some information from his memories at last. This was a communicator, and every person's ID number was their communicator number. Humans used them for long-distance communication. But it was limited to within the base only, because there was no signal outside. He charged the communicator. Although he didn't need it, this having power thing seemed to be able to make humans feel great joy. After doing so, he finally calmed down and began to examine the desk. In the notebooks on the table were things Anzi had written. The handwriting was very beautiful. On the side next to the wall stood 20 odd books, most likely all of which Anzi had used to enjoy reading. Anji glanced over the titles on the book spines, then reached out and picked up a crudely bound book with a gray cover named Base Handbook. He flipped it open. There was only one sentence on the title page. Humankind's interests take precedence over all else. Anji unconsciously pursed his lips and continued flipping through it. The second page was the table of contents. The entire handbook was divided into 4 sections. The base's laws, the base's lifestyles, regulations, summaries of the area functions, and maps. Okay, so laws, lifetime regulations, I guess maybe that involves like food and like curfew probably. Etc., like what you can have, what you can't. Summaries of the area's functions. Oh, that makes sense. Probably, yeah. And maps, which makes sense to have a map in a book about a base. You need to know where you can go and where you can't go. I meant to ask earlier, is it loud enough? I'm kind of sitting far-ish away, and I want to make sure it's coming through clearly. La 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 la. I just realized nobody's watching. Okay, never mind. Hopefully it is coming through clearly and it's not just... Alright. Anji skipped over the laws section. He knew that he was a law-abiding mushroom, and a law-abiding mushroom would not violate the laws of any species. That's kind of cute. Like, I'll give it to you. That's kind of cute. The lifestyle regulation section explained the work and rest times of residential areas in detail. I was right! Power, water, and food were supplied for an hour starting from 6 a.m. and noon every day. Dinner was supplied at 6 p.m. and power was supplied for a little longer, not getting cut off until 9 p.m. Every residential area was equipped with tall alarm towers, and the alarms were divided into 3 types: assembly, evacuation, and take shelter. The assembly alarm was a brief, high-pitched sound. The evacuation alarm was a wave-like signal, and the take shelter alarm was a shrill wail. The base's residents had to abide by the lifestyle regulations and alarm tower instructions, but they could manage the other aspects of their lives by themselves. Okay, I was right. I kind of feel a little proud of myself for that, like, not gonna lie. At this point, Anji felt slightly confused. He thought that under such regulations, every person only had to lie in their room and come out at fixed times to eat and drink. But he very quickly realized the base's intentions. Although every person could live how they liked, paying the cost of living in the base was mandatory. To obtain the currency that circulated throughout the base, people had to either find a job or become mercenaries and hand over valuable materials they collected in the wilderness to the base in exchange for payment. But in that case, everyone could simply go to the places with the lowest danger level, grab something at random, have enough food for water, or enough for food and water. Anji kept flipping the pages. The next section was the summaries of the area's functions. The first area in the section was called supply depots. They were numbered 1, 2, and 3. Oh, here. 1, 2, and 3. I just realized that I was doing 1, 2, and 3, and it's just me moving my shoulder. Sorry. First belonged to the military and were constructed at the entrance and exit of the base, and were responsible for the appraisal and exchange of currency and combat preparation materials. Whenever a mercenary team came back from the wilderness, the supply depot workers would calculate the money to be dispersed based on the materials they gathered, and the remaining lethal weaponry and armored cars would be taken into their custody, barred from entering the city. Only when the mercenary team set out again would they be able to apply for their usage once more. The mercenary teams exchanged the currency for guns, bullets, armor, fuel, and other necessities for exploring the wilderness. They could even buy different types of armored cars. Unlike the other two supply depots, Supply Depot 3, this side, 3, was located in the city. It was responsible for the exchange of civilian materials and used the base currency. There, one could exchange for many goods such as daily necessities, food and ingredients, hard liquor and electronics, or even carry out housing transactions. Across from Supply Depot 3 was the free market. Sometimes what the mercenary teams obtained from human ruins was not materials the military needed. So they could then bring the goods confirmed to be safe into the city and trade them freely. Oh, hang on, I just need a second to breathe. Maybe I'll take a sip, hang on. It's a lot. It's a lot. Whew. At that moment, Anji saw a small annotation below. Note, the free market is not an authorized facility of the base. All actions are taken at your own risk. Note, employment and contractual relationships established through the free market are not subject to legal protection by the base. Proceed at your own risk. There wasn't much else. Anji focused on the lone word employment. In other words, the free market was also a place where jobs could be provided. Why do I have a feeling this is going to be like one of those really, really sketchy ass markets? Because it's a dystopian society. Let's see how right I am. Even further down were the summaries of each residential area. The crowded residential areas were Area 6 and Area 7. The other areas had vacant buildings and very few humans. Area 8 was a centralized shelter with perfect safety facilities. Past even that was the summary of the trial court. Anji recalled the colonel with the cold green eyes, and his reading speed slowed down greatly as he began to read every single word. The responsibilities of the trial court do not only include identifying xenogenics, the gate. They also conducted daily patrols in the crowded parts of the city to carry out secondary screenings and eliminate hidden threats. The main patrol points were the areas around the supply depots, but they would also check the residential buildings on occasion, especially the ones with humans exhibiting abnormal behavior or who had been reported. Strangely, Anji once again recalled the words, "You'd best be." If he could, Anji hoped that Lu Feng would stay at the city gate forever, that the arbiter would not need to stoop to coming to the residential buildings. Continued flipping the pages. The other areas weren't of much relevance to him, such as the city affairs office, the city defense agency, the main city, and so on. The handbook stated that the base was composed of the outer city, otherwise called the fortress, and the main city. The main city was where the base's important scientific research and arms facilities were located at, as well as its energy and political center. Entry was prohibited to all unless one held a special pass or residential permit. Finally, after glancing over the map of the base, Anji closed the book. He realized once more that humans were a different sort of living thing from mushrooms. The second book he opened was called Second book he opened was called Supply Depot Assessment Guide book. As soon as he saw its cover, the relevant memories surged to the forefront of his mind, much clearer than his other memories. Anji thought that perhaps this meant that going to the supply depot was something very important to Anzi. Since that was the case, why did he agree to go out into the wilderness with Josh? He pondered it for a long time. In the end, he thought that Anzi was just that kind of human. Anzi had missed the exam. This year's supply depot recruitment exam was held 15 days ago. At that time, he was already a set of white bones. It's kind of sad. Like, this guy kind of just went along with his friend because his friend was like, I'll protect you. It's going to be fine. And totally abandons him on the edge. Oh, sorry. Notifications, sounds. So yeah, he says, okay, I'll go with you. I kind of am picking up crush vibes from this interaction. Maybe I've just read too much Don May recently, or like every pairing is like, I mean, I'm getting a little bit of sketch vibes from Josh, like, but already kind of fond of Anzi. But yeah, no, he really doesn't seem to have the best luck, honestly. Like, wanted to do this thing. His friend's like, let's come to the wilderness. And he died rather horrific. At least he didn't die alone. But, like, it still was a pretty awful way to go. I mean, speared through the stomach and then dying with a talking mushroom. Like, kind of sounds like a fever dream. Like, sounded like a great person, too. Like, super sweetheart. But yeah. On that note, but it was all right, Anji thought. A year from now, when the supply depot recruited people again, he would go give it a try if he was still living in the human base at that time. This way, after returning to the cave, he could tell Anzi what it was like there. Reading for a long time used up much of his energy. After trying to read 2 pages of the assessment guidebook, Anji started getting drowsy. In the end, he got into bed and slept. The next morning, in order to avoid running into Josh, he left his room at 4 a.m., then went downstairs to the transportation stop and got onto the train headed towards the supply depot. He wanted to go to the free market across from it to find a job. It was 7 a.m. when he got off the train, and wisps of white mist still suffused the air. The free market was a large round building with 4 entrances, and he entered through the closest one. The smell of liquor invaded his nose. Set up near the entrance were 4 long tables where people dressed as mercenaries were playing drinking games and talking loudly. Cups of alcohol sat in front of them, and every so often someone asked for a top-up. When that happened, the waiter would pour out a refill, then take out a small device and stick it into the ID cards the adults held out to charge them. A burly, dark-skinned mercenary was drinking alone. Upon seeing Anzi, the mercenary wiggled his eyebrows, grinned, and waved the cup in his hand. What you looking at, kid? Want to come over and learn how to drink? They did mention he looked like a pretty boy. The short-haired woman next to him promptly elbowed him in the chest. Her voice was husky but brimming with good cheer. Article 32, minors are not allowed to drink alcohol. The man said, if he drinks, then so be it. Or would he be taken away by the arbiter? The woman laughed openly. Children not yet of age don't know the power of the arbiter. They'll know soon enough. I feel like I keep getting closer to the screen. Anji stood nearby, wishing to tell them, I'm not a minor. But while he thought about how to word it, the two of them embraced each other, lips pressing against lips. They became entangled. He realized that nobody genuinely cared about him. Ouch. I mean, like, fair, but ouch. Thus, he shifted his gaze away from the spot and looked somewhere else. The aroma of potato soup drifted over from the right side of the entrance, but it was much stronger compared to that of the potato soup provided at the main hall of the residential building's first floor and mixed with a pleasant, meaty scent. A mercenary had his head in a white plastic soup bowl as he ate his breakfast. This smell made Anji feel a little hungry, for he hadn't eaten breakfast. Further inside were similar scenes, and a boisterous atmosphere permeated the hall. Apart from the long tables selling food and alcohol, there were also many booths selling clothes, backpacks, and gloves. Even further inside, the stalls selling regular goods decreased in number. A small stall would have many strange odds and ends that Anji couldn't recognize. Newly unearthed smartphone from Ghost City 511. Ghost City! You can turn it on once it has power. As Anji walked, a youth clothed in black and carrying a backpack jumped down in front of him like a monkey. He was short and scrawny with narrow-set eyes that constantly darted about. The moment he stopped Anji, he whipped out a black rectangular object from his bag and waved it in front of Anji. Want to take a look? I'll give you a 10% discount and throw in a free charging cable. You can play games on it. Anji said, thank you, but no. The youth then whipped out a white one from his bag. How about a different version? The color suits you. It's a new model, you know, the final Apple model from before the era of calamity. They sold for 10,000 R back then, but now just 100 R is enough. Anji said, thank you, but I don't need it. But then the person continued by taking out something else. You don't need it? You have a cell phone, huh? Do you need a portable charger? Power is out on the base. You can use this to charge. I've sold out of the large capacity ones. This one can only be charged twice, so I'll give you a discount. Only 30 R. As Anji looked at him, he said honestly, I don't have money. The black-clad youth's expression froze. In an instant, he put everything back into his backpack, turned around, and got ready to leave, muttering, what'd you come to the black market for if you don't have money? Wait, Anji called out, stopping him. He turned his head, but his attitude was extremely negative. What? I want to get a job. Don't we all, man? Don't we all in this economy? Do you know where I have to go? The youth frowned, turned back around, and examined him carefully from head to toe. So, you came to find work? Anji truthfully replied, yes. Your natural assets are quite good, the youth said. Once you have money, remember to come and buy a cell phone from me. Be staying at the black market this entire month. After a moment's silence, Anji asked, where do I go? Oh, that way. The youth pointed towards one of the corners. Go down. Third underground floor. Ask for the lady boss. Feeling very grateful, Anji smiled at him. Thank you. The youth said, you're good looking, so find someone reliable. Once you're rich, remember to come find me and buy a cell phone. Okay, replied Anji. Hang on, there's a little break. Third underground floor. Humid. That was Anji's first impression of the place. Mushrooms ought to like this type of moisture-laden atmosphere, but the acrid odor that came with this humidity made him frown. This camera's bugging me. Ugh. Looking around, Anji saw that beneath the dim lighting was a honeycomb-like space with a corridor that zigged and zagged. Countless narrow compartments were built into the walls with simple plastic boards. There was no air circulation, and the water vapor condensed into numerous droplets on the plastic boards. The entire space emitted a slight, tide-like hum. Upon listening carefully, Anji realized it was from the aggregation and reverberation of many people speaking softly, mixed with occasional shrieks of laughter. Ha ha ha! Anji hesitated briefly, then took a few steps forward. He looked at the small compartments on both sides. The ones on the left was empty, but there was a long-haired woman with her head bowed in the one on the right. After hearing his footsteps, she lifted her head to take a look, then bowed it again. Anji continued forward. He heard the sound of dialogue, the first speaker being female. How was the weather in Basin 2? Not bad. This time it was a low and soft male voice, a bit sticky and drawn out at the end. Anji suspected that his nose was clogged. The weather was very comfortable, but there were too many earthquakes. We experienced 3 earthquakes in a month. The worst time, they were all outside while I was alone in the car. I almost assumed that they couldn't make it back. The female voice laughed. If they couldn't make it back, then drive the car away. That team from the time before last, the captain said, teach me to drive, but it was all just sweet talk. He said next time, still bring me along. But that was sweet talk too. Accompanied them for a month for only 300 ARD altogether. Is that still costly? Don't take the mercenary's words seriously, the woman said. You haven't gotten used to being tricked yet? Anji stopped walking. He recalled Hosen's face and greedy, covetous eyes, and suddenly knew what was going on with the work on the 3rd underground floor. Along with the sentence in the base handbook, employment and contractual relationships established through the free market are not subject to legal protection by the base. Proceed at your own risk. He didn't want to bear those consequences. Anji silently planned to leave, but just as he turned around, he unexpectedly collided into a soft body. Oh! A high-pitched female voice said, Little darling, is this your first time here? The shadow that the words little darling cast over him was too dark. Anji reflexively took 2 steps back. Oh yeah, because Hosen. Creeper. Before him was a tall woman with honey-colored skin, upturned blue eyes, and long brown hair that ended in ringlets. She was smiling at him. Are you buying someone or selling yourself? The woman asked, smiling as she blew into his ear. Neither. Anji took another step back and bumped into plastic boards. I went the wrong way. Went the wrong way, the woman asked. The 2nd floor is the gambling den. You wanted to go there? She was holding a cigarette between the fingers of her right hand. After pulling it up to her lips and taking a drag, she said with a smile, Take care not to lose yourself. Anji looked around, but the woman had forced him into a corner, so he couldn't get away. This gorgeous-looking human was even more difficult to deal with than the monsters of the abyss. Ouch. That's kind of harsh, man. Like, she's just... It's a little harsh. Don't be scared. She blew out a mouthful of snow-white smoke. I'm not going to eat you. She asked. Then can you please let me leave? The woman smiled again. Leave? She raised her eyebrows. Only people who are driven into a corner come to the 3rd floor. If you leave, where else can you go? As she spoke, she took him by the shoulder and pulled him forward. Are you scared of this place? You don't need to be here. I'll give you a large room. Thank you, Anji said with his head down, but I really did go the wrong way. I just want to find a regular job, he said. Then someone told me to come to to the third underground floor. Only the above ground floor of the black market is presentable. For listening to his words, the woman blinked, the look in her eye just like drifting smoke. You don't even know that? And she said, I know now. He also learned that the free market in the base handbook was known informally as the black market. Called it. The laws of the base don't protect the black market. The woman smoked as she leaned against the wall, no longer pressing Anji into the corner, but rather leaving a space. Anji assumed it was a signal that she was going to let him out, but just as he took a step forward, he saw two tall men dressed in black step out from behind her, one on the left and one on the right, sealing off all possible paths. Once they come to the third floor, nobody can leave. The woman's voice was no longer set for 3 seconds, then walked deeper inside with her. The compartments were so densely packed together that it was like he was walking into a maze built from honeycomb, the lighting getting dimmer and dimmer. Finally, at the end of this space, a door appeared on the gray wall. The woman knocked on the door. Mr. Shaw, I have business to discuss with you. With a creak, the door opened. Inside was an old man with a head of snow-white hair and dressed in black from head to toe, a bow tie around his neck. He examined the woman with narrowed eyes. Do say, how rare of you to visit. I think it's do say. It's looks French-ish. Do say? I'm not sure. We're gonna say do say. Dousey. With a smile, the woman finished smoking her cigarette and stubbed it out on the wall. I was looking for you for something. How big is the business? The man asked. Mr. Shaw looked at her, then turned to look at Anji. The woman, Dousey, rested her elbow on Anji's shoulder. Not big, just difficult. I feared you wouldn't agree, so I specially brought you a greeting gift. I heard your apprentice drank himself to death and that you're looking for the next one. If female, you think they're ugly. If male, they're usually clumsy. Take a look at this kid of mine. Shaw's gray-blue eyes rolled, landing on Anji. Looks obedient. He actually is obedient, Dosei tousled her hair. Then he said to Anji, hold out your hand. Let me take a look. Anji held out a hand.